Today we welcome Robert J. Binney to the Mysteries to Die For morgue. Robert is a Seattle-based screen and short story writer. I think you all are really going to get a kick out of this one. Welcome to Mysteries to Die For. I am TG Wolff, and I'm here with Jack, my piano player and producer. This is a podcast where we combine storytelling with original music to put you at the heart of a mystery. All of our stories are structured to challenge you to beat the detective to the solution. Jack and I perform these live, front to back, no breaks, no fakes, no retakes. The rules for law and order create the boundaries for civil coexistence and, ideally, the backdrops for individuals, families, and companies to grow and thrive. Breaking these rules puts civil order at risk. And while murder is the big daddy of crimes, codified ordinances across municipal subdivisions, counties, states, and countries show the nearly endless ways there are to create mayhem. This season, we put our detective skills to the test. This is Season 8, Anything But Murder. All right, and for this episode, episode 5, Safe Burglary is our featured murderless crime. This is Clipped by Robert J. Binney.
All right, so safe burglaring. In
the context of a wedding.
Okie dokie. Well, that makes
like
it nice and
easy.
Fancy organ, yes.
A fancy organ, yes.
Doesn't that sound so fancy?
You actually confused me this time by actually playing the right intro, and because the last
I could hear the hesitation.
I was like, is he gonna keep?
Did it.
Is he gonna keep going? Okay, yes, fancy garden wedding.
Wait, didn't you say that you hate church organs in a previous episode?
I'm not fond.
You're not fond of them.
Not fond of them. Not
bummer.
Fond of the sound of them. But hey, you be you. It is appropriate for a fancy outdoor wedding. So it would be a harp. You got a harp setting?
I might. I don't know where it is on here. But I think it's funny because the organ is the only thing acceptable both at weddings and baseball games. You'd be surprised. You don't really want to see a hot dog at a wedding. Or a ball flying into the crowd. But anyway, funny. Organs. Yeah, we got those. All right. Well, I'll shut up now.
But wait, did you pick something?
Yeah, the organ.
Oh, we are going with the organ. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know where you really want to listen to me flip for 20 minutes as I look for a harp?
No.
I can do it.
No. I just didn't know you had settled on it. Did you settle on a chord progression?
I guessed that. Oh, found it. Harp.
That's awful quiet. You'd have to adjust that.
You want it nice and louder?
I don't care. You pick whichever one you like better.
The organ. Only because the organ's more full.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. Free bird.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today.
To get it right. I don't remember.
To get it right.
Is that the next line?
I don't know.
All right. Well, I'll shut up now. Let's listen to church and safes and cracking.
All right. The sheer mystery of it all. Grace McCluskey burst into tears before he tied the barber cape around her neck. It was supposed to be the best day of my life, Henri, she pronounced it the French way. Henri, and blubbered up a noseful of snot before continuing. And now I don't know what to do. Henri Beauchamp, he corrected his new clients repeatedly, met her eyes in the mirror. Bridal meltdowns in his salon chair were usually bang-related, a choice never not regretted, and usually before the big day. But today was Tuesday, 3 days after Grace's wedding, and her hair still looked perfect. Not even her swollen bloodshot eyes or running mascara could take that away from him. Oh, honey, it can't be as bad as all that. Annie said it was a fairy tale. He planted his hands firmly on her shoulders, a power move learned in beauty school. Let's get you some herbal tea and you can tell me why you are not on your honeymoon. over the years, the old biddies in for their weekly shampoos had terrified Henri with wedding night horror stories, but he couldn't imagine Grace had any trouble in that department. She'd been with her fiancé, Tony Ledro, for years, and without being explicit, he knew she had, well, experience. Henri was a few years older than Grace and didn't know her socially, but the relationship between a stylist and a young woman is sacred. The things you never tell a priest and the advice you never get from a therapist all were part of his service. And while there's no literal cone of silence on the salon floor, secrets are safe and their memories swept away with the clippings after every appointment. A short break was exactly what the June bride needed to compose herself. When Henri returned with her tea, she was ready to spill. "Now, tell me why you're here and not Bora Bora." She had showed him a brochure of the resort, rattan furniture that surely creaked and squeaked with every move, wallpaper printed with palm trees, bamboo-shaped faucets. To him, it looked like Tommy Bahama had gotten ripped on store-brand daiquiri mix, but Grace was so excited. Her tears started again. Not the ugly cry of before, but surely a girl dries out, sooner or later. Grace honked her nose and then got to the point. Someone robbed the reception. "Oh my God!" Henri's voice jumped an octave. "At gunpoint?" "No, Henri, we didn't see it happen." "Oh, then, you were burgled, not robbed," he corrected. "You sound like my father," Grace said. She told him that all of the money that had been gifted, which they'd been counting on for the honeymoon, had been stolen. No cash, no travel. No credit cards? Henri didn't like touching cash even if it was left for him at the desk. She dapped a soaked tissue uselessly to the corner of her eyes. "We didn't want to start our lives together in debt. Daddy bought the airline tickets, but we'd counted on the wedding gifts to cover everything else." That sounded presumptuous to Henri, but it fit with his perception of the McCluskey family. Old school traditions. A waterfront estate, eldest son inherits, daughters marry, and Tony, Grace's new husband, had landed at one of the fancy investment banks in the city. He made good money, but not great money, and they both still had student loans. Still, given the family wealth, it seemed cruel that Grace's father let her suffer. "I hadn't heard anything about this." "Oh, Henri, we're keeping this a secret." He zipped his lips and threw away the key. "When did you talk to Annie?" Grace asked. "I'm sorry?" She explained. "You said Annie told you about the reception? When did you see her? The salon was closed yesterday and Sunday." Henri had been in the empty shop on Sunday, working on his frosted tips. Ordinarily, he'd let one of the girls do it, but he was practicing a new foil technique. Right when he got everything wrapped up just so, there had been a frantic knock on the door. It was Grace's best friend and maid of honor, Andy DeCrono. She needed an emergency bikini wax. What kind of monster would turn her away? In fact, Annie hadn't said much. That service makes small talk awkward. Plus, she'd been pretty hungover. Henri would say she looked rough. Oh, who was he kidding? He would exactly say that. But when Annie clocked herself in the mirror, she remarked that she looked like her passport picture. She pulled it out of her jeans pocket to prove it. The salon lighting was better, but Henri had to agree. Stylist-client privilege prevented him from sharing these details, so he told Grace only that he'd bumped into her. He gave Grace's shoulder another squeeze, one that was signaled it was time to leave. Money troubles were the worst gossip, even if hers were more lurid than the client's usual tales of woe. He didn't have stakes in crime, but he did have a schedule to keep. What did the police say? "Daddy's convinced he knows who did it, so you know what that means." "Who?" Henri asked. He started to untie her cape. "He says it was the caterer." "Pammy? No! I recommended her." "I know, Henri. Daddy asked me if it was a setup." He pulled the bib string so tightly they almost snapped. "Pam Burns was my partner in home economics class. She would never, and I would never." That's it, he decided. It just became personal. "Grace, honey, I'm going to get to the bottom of this." "How?" she gasped, trying to loosen her collar. "I will investigate. I have a state license." He pointed at the certificate taped to the mirror. "But that's a beautician's license," she said. test is practically the same." He snapped her cape off with a bullfighter's flourish. "I can't promise you I'll get your monies back, but I swear I will deliver justice." Teasing out the facts. Henri's first stop was to visit the scene of the crime and to interview Grace's father. Actually, first he tried to call his friend Pam Burns, but it went to voicemail. He was sure the caterer hadn't done anything wrong, but wanted to hear that directly from her. A maid answered the front door. Henri hadn't waited long before he heard yelling, door slamming, and then Sean McCluskey III barreled down the right side of an imperial staircase into the grand foyer, duck boots squeaking on the Art Deco tile. McCluskey's fashion sense had graduated from prep school: deliberately unpressed khakis, duck boots, a quarter-zip sweater, and a salesman's smile. It all felt a little practiced. They toured the grounds where the ceremony was held, behind the koi pond, to where the 600 guests dined and danced, by the butterfly garden. The yard was immaculate. Pam's team had done a remarkable job cleaning up after themselves. The circuit ended at the French doors outside the McCluskey's home office. "I'm not so bold as to tell you you're wasting your time with this so-called investigation." McCluskey didn't make finger quotes, but Henri could hear them in his voice. Henri interrupted. "It's important to your daughter." "Which makes it important to me. Before we continue, may I see your credentials?" He held out his hand. Henri was prepared. He swiped his phone awake and handed it over. McCluskey pinched and zoomed on the certificate expiration date. Henri studied the tapered edge of the man's recent razor cut and the finger width of white skin on his nape, indicating the roughly 3 weeks between barbershop visit. This detecting stuff was easy. The older man nodded in approval. They stood in silence. If there's one thing a hairdresser can't stand, besides rinsing out store brand conditioner, it's silence. "Well?" Henri asked. McCluskey swept his hand across the immediate area. "This is where your friend set up her catering tent, conveniently next to my study." Henri shook his head. He didn't follow. McCluskey sounded patronizing. "My safe is in there. Your friend waltzed in, broke into my safe, and waltzed out with the money." Henri did not like the way the man said "your friend," implying complicity. He asked, "Why are you convinced it was Pam?" McCluskey spat the answer. "She's from the city." Henri loved living and working in Bayville, but understood locals' distrust of the big city. If he believed everything he'd heard from his clients, and hairdressers are contractually obligated to believe their clients, he'd be wary of urban dwellers too. But that didn't make her guilty. "Before we jump to conclusions, sir, can we take a step back? Tell me about the events leading up to the alleged crime." McCluskey huffed. "Nothing alleged about it." Henri was the one with the certificate, but he let that go. McCluskey showed Henri into the study. Dark paneling, over-cushioned leather furniture, bookshelves so stocked that there was a ladder that slid the length of the wall. The only thing missing was a stuffed hunting trophy over the fireplace. He moved the life-size portrait of his grandfather, Sean Sr., to expose a wall safe. He explained that he had opened it several times during the reception, but besides family photographs, the room was off limits to reception guests, and definitely forbidden territory for staff. He added that it was only after the party ended and the caterers had left that he noticed the money was missing. Henri was certain that Pam did not know how to crack a safe, even a digital one like this. McCluskey said, "If not her, one of her cooks." Henri didn't buy it. "They guessed the PIN number?" "It's just PIN," McCluskey corrected. "The code is, well, it was personal to me. I changed it naturally." Henri asked why there was so much cash on hand and where it came from. The father of the bride explained that many guests brought what was called a money bag, a small lace or tool pouch with cash inside, and presented it to Grace, usually in exchange for a spin around the dance floor. "That's a lot of Macarena," Henri said. McCluskey continued. Or they just handed their gift to me, and we'd have a quick chat. Henri raised a well-groomed eyebrow. You know I have business interests, the old man chuckled. Of course, Henri knew. Everyone in town knew. How Sean Sr. operated a Main Street newsstand that Sean Jr. built into a chain of regional electronics stores, and how this man right here, Sean III, parlayed that into warehouses, van rentals, and even classic rock radio stations and a cable sports channel. Henri could only imagine how much cash was forked over. I just bought them a blender, Henri said. They still had their registry, McCluskey clarified. The Borsa is... It's a show of respect. It was a nice blender, sir. Made smoothies. Business doing okay? McCluskey snapped. Aren't you crass? I'm not the one with the pay-to-play wedding gifts, Henri wanted to say. Instead, he explained, you were on a call when I arrived. I didn't hear the details, but it sounded contentious. McCluskey waved him off. It's just a poison pill situation. Nothing to worry about. Our stock price is fine. Henri turned back to the wall vault. And you put all the money in here? Every pouch, McCluskey confirmed. And it's all gone. Henri should probably write that down. Every penny. Look, you're on thin ice, Mr. Beauchamp. You brought that woman here. If you don't bring the money back, I'm holding you responsible. Henri was shocked, but not surprised. Are you going to arrest me for making a referral? No, the business titan sneered. But imagine what my wife and her friends can do to your reputation. Henri didn't like bullies. Aren't you afraid false accusations may get you in trouble? The old man jabbed his finger across his desk. I wouldn't say it if I hadn't considered it carefully. You think I got where I am by using imprecise language? In this family? In fact, our father, a familiar voice boomed behind Henri. Our Father, who art in heaven, Henri spun. Father Pat McCluskey, Sean's youngest brother, had sneaked up behind him. Good morning, Your Excellency. And to you, Monsieur Beauchamp, the priest smiled. I keep telling you, you don't need to. He spun his finger in the air, dismissing any hoity-toityness. Sean was surprised that they knew each other. Father Pat explained, We're both regulars in the mayor's Friday poker game. Sean shook his head, and here I thought gambling was a sin. The way your brother plays it is, Henri joked. Yes, sometimes I forget my calling, and it is true, I do not win much. Father Pat looked at Henri and winked. Or ever, but there are other rewards to consider. Well, then I have to ask, Father, did you break into the safe Saturday night? Henri teased. Sean McCluskey exploded. I hope you're a better detective than that, for your friend's sake, and for yours. Of course, I did not take anything out of my brother's safe, Father Pat said, touching his collar, chest, and then pointing to heavens. Henri held his hands up in mock surrender and back to the door. Henri called Pam again on his way out, but still no answer. His feet crunched in the gravel driveway, walking past the family's Range Rovers and Benzes. He felt better about his seafoam green Mazda Miata when he saw the brown Plymouth parked next to it, Father Pat's. He wondered how many sedans the average wedding money bag would buy. The rich really do live different. I told you it was a fancy wedding at a garden.
Seems like it was. I don't remember you telling me this. I remember hearing random parts about this story when you were like, this one's cool. It's got a barber named Henri.
It's because it's one of your favorite names ever. You just remember Henri.
That is true. The story I'm writing right now, I just named a guy Henri. Yeah, it's an addiction. That name. Not actual guys named Henry or nothing. Just the name.
Just the name.
Just the name. It's an addiction. There's they call it HH. Henri Anonymous. Henri Anonymous.
You named a character Anonymous?
No.
Oh.
Actually, I named a different character in that same story Anonymous, but wow, you're just guessing the whole story right now. What's happening right now?
We're getting out of the story that we're in, which is Clipped.
Clipped?
By Robert J. Binney.
Oh, that's the name of the story. I'm going to shut up and we're going to start. Not start. Continue.
with the next chapter, which is Curls Just Want to Have Fun. Henri decided to complete the trifecta of McCluskey brothers and killed 2 birds at once by getting a police update. But Captain Frank McCluskey was on patrol. He wondered how much crime Bayville could have before remembering he was licensed and investigating a case. Back at his salon, his afternoon appointments were an absolute bore. Very little wedding gossip, mostly about how pretty the bride looked, to which Henri replied, "Thank you." No one seemed to have heard of the theft. Henri tried to seed the conversation by bringing up the money bags. His 2 o'clock, a shampoo and rinse, said the very idea sounded gauche, and his 3 o'clock said that the practice was a ethnic thing. One benefit of being a hairdresser is that you don't always have to chase clues. Sometimes they come right to you and sit in your chair. At least, that's what Henri hoped when he saw Grace's Aunt Abigail on his schedule. Actually, her ex-aunt. Abigail and Captain Frank had been through a messy divorce, so Henri was optimistic that she'd have inside dirt. He was dreading, though, the inevitable embarrassment of running different credit cards through the machine, trying to find which one wasn't maxed. Any percentage of nothing is still nothing, she said about her alimony suit. But today, Abigail was in a good mood. Even though she was no longer officially a McCluskey, she attended the wedding, and Grace had even asked her to sit for family portraits. Henri squeezed her shoulders in delight. And how did the ex react? Abigail groaned and told him exactly what Frank had said. "Oh my God," Henri squealed. "He said that?" Whatever his other flaws, my ex-husband is honest. The story of Abe Lincoln and the cherry tree definitely impacted him. American history is a major component of the state beautician exam, so Henri knew she meant George Washington, but the point remained. Since she was in the family photos, she would have been in the study, the scene of the crime. But if she knew anything about the theft, she didn't drop a hint. Abigail paid her bill and tipped generously with cash. After closing, Henri went to Grace's apartment. He wanted to update her on the investigation and get some perspective from Tony, her groom. Another 2-bird, 1-stone situation. Like the best hairdressers, Henri was a superb multitasker. Henri was anxious to see what grand romantic gestures Tony made to remedy the abandoned honeymoon. He probably filled the place with tiki lights and exotic potted plants, a calypso playlist cranking, and paper umbrellas and pina coladas. Actually, Henri presumed they would have been too, busy to open the door. Instead, Grace answered almost immediately. He stepped inside, taking in the IKEA furniture and crate and barrel decorations. No tiki lights, no grass skirts, no rum drinks in the blender, and no Tony. Grace smiled, a false gesture belied by her puffy red eyes, and said that Tony was away at a business conference. He got a call Sunday morning, she said, and with the honeymoon scrapped, he couldn't turn it down. Henri patted her hands. "Well, far be it from me to stick my nose in your business." It was hard to keep a straight face. His nose was at its best in other people's business. Combing through the details. The depressing event over, Henri needed a drink and a snack. He walked Main Street towards Sal's Pizza, delicious even if the carbs did nothing for his hips, but he looked in the window of Glider's Pub. Finally! A second bird! Captain Frank sat alone at the bar nursing a pitcher of happy hour suds. Henri took the stool next to him. Frank gave him a side-eyed glance, his hangdog face wary. Their reflection in the bar mirror made quite the study in contrast. Frank, in the suit Abigail bought him when he made detective, hair thinning, foam in his mustache, eyes heavy and thick, and Henri, his perfectly mousse coif, open-collared paisley shirt, and pores as clear as the vodka tonic he ordered. He wasn't judging. Henri was quickly learning the toll investigations can take. He white-knuckled the silence and watched SportsCenter with Captain Frank. Henri had no clue what they were talking about on screen. Beauty school taught him 3 phrases to deflect conversations away from sports, and that was the extent of his knowledge. So he sat, obsessing about trimming the policeman's eyebrows. On a commercial break, Frank waved to Glider for another pitcher and a refill for Henri. Frank was drinking the local IPA, not the cheap stuff. Without looking away from the television, he said, "Here you're investigating my brother's business." He turned to Frank. "I'm only trying to find the money bags." "And since you were there," Frank slammed his mug on the bar, "what did that mama's boy tell you?" Henri knew there were 3 McCluskey brothers, but nothing about their relationship with each other. Sean was the oldest and held the keys to his father's kingdom. Patrick, the baby, took the vows and became Father Pat. That left Frank in the middle. He wanted to be a genuine G-man and was recruited by the FBI, but he was back in Bayville before anyone even missed him. Turned out he was just too honest a guy to work undercover. He famously tried to live an executive's lifestyle on a cop's salary. When his anticipated inheritance never came, Abigail left, and Frank lived in a crappy one-room apartment above Glider's ever since. He all but signed his weekly paycheck over to the pub. It was his landlord and his kitchen. If tabletop shuffleboard counted, it was his fitness center. Henri flipped open his detective notebook. "Your brother's convinced the caterer did it." Frank fished through a bowl of bar mix, pulling out the cashews. "Shame, too. Food was good. There were these brisket sliders that... I wonder where they found her." "Actually, Frank, I recommended her. She's an old friend." The policeman took a hard look at Henri, almost made him feel guilty. "So she helped herself to a gratuity? 27 grand buys a lot of them." Frank arched his thumb and forefinger, bobbing it like he was holding something with heft. Henri didn't know if he was miming sliders or sterno cans. Frank mumbled, "That's a lot of cash. You know what Abigail and I got for our wedding?" Henri waited. Frank squinted, focusing on the rubber bar mat, lost in some memory. Time to get the conversation back on track. "I'm certain Pammy is totally innocent." "You talked to her?" Frank asked, a dangerous glint in his eye. Or maybe it was more foam from the IPA. Henri gulped. I tried, left some messages." "Well, I hope you didn't warn her. I took the patrol car out there, into the city. Hoo boy, her shop was closed up." Frank swallowed a belch. "Neighbor said something about the CIA. That explains things." Henri might not know a lot about a lot, but he knew his certification programs. And the CIA, the Culinary Institute of America, was right up there with the Barbizon School for Hair and DeVry Technical. He guessed she was at her annual requalification. He looked up from his notes. "I guess if you'd seen anything suspicious, you would have investigated. Say if you saw anyone go into the study alone? Like you said, if I suspect, I inspect. And of course, you didn't take the money yourself." Henri assumed Frank knew he was kidding, but the joke landed as well as the time he said whoops while cutting a junior leaguer's hair. Frank's hand disappeared under the bar toward his hip. "Watch yourself. Not to quote my pops, but choose your words carefully." Then he sighed. "Nah, you had to ask. Any good investigator would. Look, if I knew how to open that thing, I would have gotten in there years ago when Pops was still around. Changed a thing or two on the will." A loud ramble outside rattled the glasses behind the bar. Frank stood and threw down 2 20s. "Don't write that little bit of family history in your notebook. As far as you're concerned, I'm going to pick up the catering girl and book her. Case closed. You're just wasting your time and my niece's money." Henri never had discussed fees with Grace. Through the bar window, he saw the source of a rumbling, a shiny red Camaro, sales price still soaked on the windshield, top down, and a busty blonde driving. Radio blasting a story of Bobby Joe and Betty Sue. Captain Frank climbed to the passenger seat. The driver, Kitty Gibson, leaned over and gave him a long, embarrassingly sloppy kiss before grinding the clutch and slipping away. Glider collected Frank's cash, watched with the disappointment of a TV dad. I don't know what's got more miles, that car or the girl. The last of Henri's cocktail came out of his nose. His mother used to tell him, "If you don't have anything nice to say, sit with me." She would have liked the bartender. Last I heard, Kitty was selling supplements over at Sully's gym. I guess she's doing well for herself. Glider waggled his eyebrows. If that's all she's selling. Bartenders and hairdressers, the keenest observers of humanity. A fresh new look. Henri attacked his Wednesday morning with the vigor, with such a spring in his step that no one would have guessed how badly his new shoes pinched. Grace arranged for Henri to call her husband on his business trip that afternoon. He couldn't imagine what he'd learn, but it felt like an investigator's duty. He spent the night swiping through photos posted by wedding guests. Not helpful, since, as Sean McCluskey told him, the residence was off limits. It was basically couture porn. Every several hundred well-dressed strangers mingling in a big yard. It was too much to hope he'd spot a black Vera Wang sulking in the grounds with a bag of cash. At least it gave him the idea for his first stop of the day. Flash Masterson Photography. Henri didn't know Flash well. His basic haircuts were walk-ins with one of the girls who worked the other side of Henri's mirror. But he sure couldn't picture him as a thief. And he certainly didn't visit the shop/studio often. Messes made him uncomfortable, and the place gave off the vibe of a national chain restaurant, the kind at a busy intersection advertising 2-for-1 fried appetizers, with its antique cameras and kitschy glamour shots on the wall. Shelves overflowed with sun-faded boxes marked Kodak and Polaroid. Henri had never snapped a pic on any device that didn't play Candy Crush, but he had to imagine that film had expired. Today, though, the film packages, plus the pictures of leisure-suited men and big-haired women in neon taffeta, had been tossed in a dumpster. Henri found Flash in the back office, rolling camera equipment in bubble wrap and packing it in brown boxes. "You're moving?" Henri asked. Flash was the closest thing Bayville had to an artiste, with his salt and pepper Van Dyke and black t-shirt. "My brother hooked me up on a crew for a reality show, so hooray for Hollywood. I always said that when my nest egg was big enough, and well, it's time." "I don't mean to pry," Henri lied. "I don't mind telling you, the McCluskey job put me over the top." Henri's eyes bugged out like a cartoon rabbit. Flash looked away. "I didn't cheat him or anything. I just charged a premium. Payback, I guess." Sounds petty to say it out loud. Henri nodded sympathetically and asked Flash if he could see the run of wedding photos. He was worried that Flash would press him for a reason, but packing seemed to take a precedent. When he hadn't specified which photos, so he seated at a widescreen monitor, he had to flick through a few hundred shots of the ceremony and the pre-reception cocktails. "What do you mean, payback?" he asked. "Right, you weren't here when I opened," Flash said, before sharing the saga of his studio. He bought the existing camera store and 1-hour photo developer, a business model that quickly tanked. He hadn't seen that coming and was stuck with a lot of inventory. Henri was barely paying attention. He had finally scrolled to the sequence taken in Sean McCluskey's study. There were a dozen or so portraits of various family members, from both bride's and groom's side, and at least 100 other candids of aunts and uncles and in-laws mingling. Something caught Henri's eye, but he was interrupted by Flash's sudden popping of bubble wrap. Flash apparently had been speaking the whole time. "See, I bought the shop from Sean McCluskey, and the day after I signed the loan to buy all that film, he launched his digital media business. I've been paying it down until the McCluskey job," Henri volunteered. He was just about to give up on the photos when he realized what he'd been looking at. It was a series of Grace and Tony playing patty cake with the flower girl in Sean's study. Not much was happening in the foreground, but in the first picture, he saw Sean standing in the back corner by the fireplace. In the second, Sean was moving his grandfather's portrait, and in the third, he was standing at the safe, fingers poised over the keyboard. By the sixth frame, the safe was open. Henri clicked backwards to the third picture and zoomed in. Sean's finger was on the 1 button. A red digital 1 appeared on the safe's LED screen. In the next picture, the display read 12. The next was fuzzy, but in that sixth shot, the one with the safe open, the display clearly showed 1206. The combination. Ha! Henry couldn't help himself. What's that? Flash asked and stepped over to look at the screen. Henri quickly closed the file and stood to leave. Who else has seen these? No one, Flash said. I'm still sorting them for Grace. Well, me. I review every shot while I'm on site. Why? Henry thanked him. He had what he needed. Henri passed the church on the way to the salon. Father Pat stood out front, watering his begonias. After neighborly pleasantries, the priest asked about the case. Henri told him he was making progress but spared details. He didn't want to get the family's hopes up. Father Pat nodded and pointed toward the photo studio. That Masterson fellow, suspicious timing with this move. I wonder if he and your friend are in cahoots. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, Father. Henri remembered what Sean McCluskey said about the safe's combination being personal. So he asked, does the number 1206 mean anything to you? Father Pat set down the watering can, dried his hands, and adjusted his collar. December 6, 12/6 was our mother's birthday. Why do you ask? Henri answered with another question. Were you boys close to your mother? Father Pat put his hand on Henri's shoulder. God loves all his children equally. That's not what I asked, Henri thought.
You're telling me Flash was in the room, had the full combination and everything, and he didn't do it? Nah, Flash did it.
Flash was across the room taking pictures, man.
So he could have done it some other time. He had the combination and he had access to the room.
He had a combination and he had access to the room.
He sure did. And not very many other people had the combination as far as we're aware. And then Father Pat is just a weird dude who says God loves everyone. And not that that's the weird part, but that he's using that as responses to random questions.
Well, not to random questions, but were you boys close to your mother?
God loved her.
Yeah.
God loved her.
God loved her. I didn't have to.
Exactly. I guess no one really liked her that much.
Oh,
apparently,
goodness.
Poor woman. All right. Moving on.
2, things get hairy. At the stroke of 3, Henri settled in his tiny office and checked himself in the phone's camera before connecting with Tony. On screen, Tony sat in his hotel room, which was a disaster area. The sheets were pulled onto the floor and the pillows were stacked at the foot of the bed. No housekeeping? Henri blurted. He hoped he didn't sound as indignant as he felt. Tony looked around and shrugged. Bro, it's still major early here. Henri frowned. Kansas City is only an hour difference. What? Oh, right. The room looked familiar to Henri. I just wanted to ask your thoughts on the missing money. Bro, total bummer. A very different reaction than his bride. Tony, can you hear me okay? There's a weird sound like a squeaking or a creaking. Tony fired a Clint Eastwood stare above his laptop and the creaking stopped. TV's on. Financial news. Henri could see a widescreen TV mounted behind Tony, turned off. That's what you do, right? Financial stuff? Yeah, bro. I'm an analyst. Figure out how companies are doing, what their stock prices should do, who's in the black, who's getting a haircut. Henri had no idea what that meant, but it reminded him of something Sean McCluskey has said. So if someone had to take a potion? Tony laughed. You mean a poison pill? You've been talking to Grace's old man. Bro, that's nothing to worry about. Henri hadn't been worried. But if it was, what would he do about it? Bro, it's no problem. He'd just throw cash at it. Tony went on about the beta analysts and net present values, all of which went over Henri's head. The upshot was that Sean McCluskey needed cash, and fast. One last question, Henri said, squinting at the screen. Are those palm trees on the wallpaper? Yeah, bro, cheese-a-rama, right? After he disconnected, Henri's pulse raced. He could tell he was sweating through today's silk paisley. Luckily, he kept a small hairdryer in his office for just such emergencies. Google found the resort whose brochure Grace had shown him. He scrolled through the photo gallery while their toll-free number rang. Luckily, Arika, the desk clerk, was chatty. Henri lowered his voice in disguise. Hello, yes, this is Jean-Louis St. Jean Smith from Investigations. He pronounced it Jean-Louis St. Jean Smither. We had a report that a canceled reservation was being charged. Oh dear, Adika said. What's the name on the reservation? Henri told her, and for a solid minute it sounded like she was angry at her keyboard. Sir, it says that the Ladro is actually checked in on Sunday. Well, that would explain the credit card charges, Henri bluffed. No, sir, it shows they're paying cash. Henri was confused. You said they checked in? Have you met them? Atika giggled. Oh no, everyone knows that they've had their Do Not Disturb sign up since they arrived. Oh dear, Henri agreed. His next call was to Pam. Another message, his fourth in 2 days. I can't say why I'm calling, it's just important. If you're in trouble, I can help. A terrible thought hit him. Could Pammy had run off with the groom? Making waves. Henri's investigation was creating more questions than answers. He needed a new approach. Hair salons are magnets for women's gossip. But to learn what the common man knows, a good detective goes to the local dive bar. The town's waterfront was all the cutesy boutiques and ice cream shops, but south of the bay, everything turned industrial, with marine mechanics and deep-sea charters, and the Bootlegger Tavern. Henri slid his Miata in between the beater pickups and boat trailers and walked confidently into the Bootlegger. It was a lot. Fishing nets and outdated bikini calendars on the wall, a cowboy band tuning in the corner, and at least a dozen televisions each turned to a different sports event. The place was hopping, packed with people laughing and toasting each other, the happiest of happy hours. Henri sat at the bar next to a sun-leathered sailor with disturbingly bushy tufts of ear hair. He leaned over. What's all the hubbub? Without looking up, the sailor said, Some old guy in the back room just paid off his nut. Praise the Lord and hallelujah, he shouted for a round. My God, Henri said. How big was the bar tab? Weren't his bar tab. So that's what all the TVs were for. Oh, he whispered. Gambling? The old man nodded. Close to 10 grand, I reckon. Henri felt a hand clamp down on his shoulder. A voice hissed, Henry! Actually, it's... Henri spun in his chair and faced a giant of the man, whose gut tested the button strength of his flannel shirt. There was something familiar about him, but Henri was too offended by the man's haircut. Against all logic, it accentuated his male-pattern baldness. Henri wanted to know whose work that was so he can report them to the guild. It's you, Henry Beecham. He pronounced it Beecham, just like any decent American, just like the voices from Henri's past. It took him a beat before Henri recognized him. Jack Winters, from second grade until graduation, a bully, but good at math. He hustled sports bet out of his locker. Eventually got him kicked off the varsity football and almost expelled. What are you doing here? You some kind of cop? Henri shook his head. No, I'm a barber. Jack snapped his fingers and held out his hand. Henri swiped his phone open and handed it over. The man scrutinized Henri's certificate and casually tossed the phone against the front door. Then he grabbed Henri's lapels, at least the silk won't wrinkle, and hoisted him. You shouldn't be poking around in here. Be smart and let your old girlfriend take the blame. When Henri was 6 days late paying his pomade supplier, they threatened to break his legs. He asked Jack, how do you let someone get so far in debt? Jack threw Henri after his phone. He crashed through the door and rolled into the parking lot. The big man followed, kicking him in the stomach. Unlike you, He has protection. Henri grunted. There's no mafia in Bayville? Not the mob, Hank. Henri picked him up and shoved him against a parked car. Even more powerful. The last thing Henri remembered was his head slamming into the familiar sedan's windshield.
That got violent quickly, guys. I don't know what the hell just happened.
Henri got his ass kicked by somebody named Jack.
Apparently, I kicked Aunt Henry's ass.
Jack Winters.
Henry Beecham.
Henry
Got bait.
Beecham.
I tell you what. And some old guy in the back wasn't big. Probably Shawnee boy. Probably Sean wasn't big. Yep, in the back. Yeah, probably gambling. Yep, and that's how he lose all his money, right? He is broke, right? I did pick up on that, right?
He's having money troubles. We don't know that he's broke.
Troubles. I see. So he's got motive. Not that, yeah. Well, it would explain why, he didn't pay for them to go to Bora Bora anyway.
That's
he didn't
true.
have the money to go.
He did buy the plane tickets. He just didn't buy the hotel and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
He must be kind of tight with his money because here he is, this like uber rich guy, but his kids still took out student loans.
Uber rich guy whose kids have student loans, who he's probably gambling, and apparently is having money issues. So who really knows? I still think Flash did it. Yep, Flash Gordon struck again.
We'll find out here because we're going to cut through the nonsense.
Cut through the nonsense. Let's go for it.
Henri woke at home with a pounding headache. He had no idea how he got there. He checked himself in the mirror. No cuts or bruises, but he had a goose egg that no amount of concealer would hide. Against all good judgment, he gelled his bangs down and hoped no one would notice. He dragged through his day, and when his last appointment wrapped, he raced out to the Marina Club to see Sean McCluskey. As soon as his Uber pulled up, Henri was escorted to Sean's patio table. He liked that Sean never made him wait. One of the hardest skills a hairdresser masters is scheduling. Game respects game. The mogul was digging into the platter of crab legs the size of the Renaissance Fair drumsticks, the late afternoon sun beaming off the water behind him. A dozen or so mega yachts were moored below. Henri tried to play it cool. I should park mine here. The older man cringed. You mean dock. Words mean things. He finally looked up at his guest. Christ, what happened to you? You're telling me those weren't your goons last night at the bootlegger? Sean nodded at the table to his left, and the four bald linebackers in Oakleys and tight-fitting corporate golf shirts glared at Henry. The bootleggers isn't exactly our style. But they knew about my investigation, about Pam. Henri sounded whiny, even to himself. Time to change tactics. I know about your investor problem. Sean's glib face collapsed. Keep your voice down. What's your angle? You need cash. Sean burst out laughing, mouth full of crab meat. Seafood indeed. I would be offended if it wasn't so silly. Look, I don't know how much was stolen, but a few dozen envelopes and maybe a couple $100 each, I need millions. He dove deep into the nitty-gritty, which made no sense to Henri. But the cocktails flowed, and Henri decided that if he ever went broke, he'd rather go broke like this, at a yacht club with flown-in fresh meals, and not struggling to pay for frozen food at the corner bar like the guy's brother. The main event, and that's M-A-N-E. Henri's Friday was packed, only ducking out to get his phone screen repaired. While he waited, he learned that Captain Frank was about to subpoena both Pam Burns and Flash Masterson's bank records. At the end of the day, he locked up the salon, planning to work the case until it was time for poker. Instead, he fell asleep on the couch, his subconscious untangling everyone's stories. Even the most luxurious head of hair contains a few strands that frizzes and kinks and curls against the grain. A strip mall barber hacks away at the obvious. The patient hairdresser finds the wayward lock, teases it out, and addresses it. Henri was patient. Even before he knew his Saturday was going to be filled with surprises, Henri was glad he'd chosen his nicest lightweight linen shirt. The temperatures turned from spring to summer overnight, which made for a balmy walk across town to the annual pancake breakfast. If he had known how carb-heavy detective work was, he would have never taken the case. The day's first surprise stood outside City Hall. Pam Burns, the long-lost caterer. After hugs and air kisses, Henri playfully slapped her arm. I know, she said. I got your messages, but I was away at my annual crudité accreditation. She waved her bandaged fingers as proof. Pammy, why are you here in Bayville? She nearly leapt out of her chef's clogs. I got so many referrals from that wedding. I have sales visits here. Thank you so much for recommending me. That may have been the best day of my career. Henri took her arm and steered her toward City Park, where it seemed everyone in town had already settled in for flapjacks. He couldn't help think that if he discovered she took the money, it would also have been her worst day. So, what were you so desperate to talk to me about? She asked. Pammy, I just need to know. Did you or your staff ever go into Mr. McCluskey's study? No, never. We couldn't have if we wanted to. The doors were locked. Then she looked at her feet. I know I wasn't supposed to go in there, but I was looking for a bathroom. Good enough for Henri. They checked in at the desk and made their way to the Chamber of Commerce's table. Flash Masterson was there, along with Mayor Vaughn, Sal, and Mrs. Butterwick, the foul-mouthed piano teacher, and Father Pat. He looked both upset and surprised to see Pam. The police department filled the table to his left. Captain Frank and Kitty Gibson seemed flagrantly lovey-dovey, simply to taunt his ex, Abigail, who was standing at the coffee station. Also, Henri thought Frank was actively ignoring the McCluskey family table on Henri's right. Which introduced the morning's second surprise. Tony had returned. He was digging into his stack and looking neither guilty nor sunburned. Most suspicious, Henri thought. Grace ignored her husband and her breakfast, deep in excited conversation with her best friend, Annie DeCrono, who also did not look sunburned. It must have been the happiest he'd seen Grace all week. Sean McCluskey leaned back in his chair and said to Henri, I see you delivered our thief. If she returns the money today, I'll drop the charges. Henri took a page from Captain Frank and ignored him. The mayor asked what he meant. Sean waved his plastic fork at Pam. That woman stole my daughter's wedding money. A hush fell over both tables. Henri explained that he was still investigating everyone involved, which only prompted questions from his seatmates and denials from Flash and Pam. The mayor tapped his glass. Have you asked who took the money? Henri smiled at his naivete. You know, I actually did ask folks if they stole the money, and I believe everyone who said they didn't. Some detective, he thought, believing their stories. Father Pat stood. His plate could have come straight from the dishwasher. Neither crumb nor drop of syrup remained. He patted his stomach and announced, Well, I have to go and polish tomorrow's sermon. It's almost there, but I'd like to make sure I find just the right words. Then came the final surprise. Everything suddenly became as obvious to Henri as Kitty Gibson's roots. Father Pat, I think you just may have cracked the case. Have a seat. All right, we are at the deliberation. So I have to tell you all, the puns in this just make me laugh so hard. There were so many times I had to be like, don't laugh, don't laugh, don't laugh. Oh, I really like Henri. I think he's my favorite
character. There are way
character.
too many suspects in this story, guys. I don't know. I got like a 1 in a dozen chance.
Okay, we'll go through everything. I think everything will cluster nicely, okay?
It'll cluster nicely.
Henri Beauchamp, hairdresser extraordinaire,
Henry
is
Beauchamp.
honor-bound to investigate the burglary of Grace McCluskey's wedding purse. Henri may have a certificate, but he needs our help to tease out this whodunit. Here is who he met in the order presented.
Annie
DeCrono, Grace's best friend and slut of honor, maid of honor.
Slut of honor?
Maid of honor.
How do we know for sure she's a slut of honor?
Oh, I need an emergency bikini wax to go with my new passport.
Oh, okay. Slut of honor. Sean.
Sean McCluskey III, eldest brother and father of the bride, a high-end family businessman.
Big Daddy Pat.
Father Pat McCluskey, youngest brother, priest, and very poor poker player.
Apparently. Anyway, Captain.
Captain Frank McCluskey, middle brother, too honest to work undercover.
Captain Gordon.
Yep, Flash Masterson, wedding photographer burned by McCluskey in a business deal.
Pam Wham Bangalang.
Pam Burns, wedding caterer accused of the theft.
Abigail.
Abigail McCluskey, Frank's ex-wife who attended the wedding.
And Tony.
Yep, Tony Ladro, the junior level broker and groom. See, you know all these people.
I read it off your screen.
Well, we have the three brothers.
I know who they are. I just don't know who did it.
Okay. Here are the facts as Henri is considering.
Okay.
At Grace McCluskey and Tony Ladro's intimate 600-person wedding, the safe holding the cash wedding gifts was open and emptied. The house was off limits with a few exceptions.
Ooh.
The safe with the digital lock was in Sean McCluskey III's study, and the combination was his mother's birthday.
Okay.
Caterer Pam Burns is accused by Sean. She tried to go into the house to find a bathroom, but says the doors were locked.
Alrighty.
Pam went MIA for several days, and when she resurfaced, she claimed she was at a recertification class.
Okay.
Okay, so that's one of the things that made me laugh out loud.
The CIA?
No, the crudité recertification class. Do you know what crudité is?
I don't remember.
It's chopped vegetables.
Oh.
Chopped vegetable recertification class, and she came back with bandages on her fingers.
It's good proof.
It's good. I bled for an alibi. Photographer Flash Masterson was in the study when he took family pictures. One series included Sean in the background opening the safe, which captured the combination. Flash appears not to know what he had.
Apparently.
All other suspects were in the study for the family picture.
Okay.
Sean McCluskey, the eldest brother and family heir, needs cash for his business. He didn't know how much was in the safe, but it wouldn't be enough. He needed millions.
I don't think it was old Shauna Boy.
Captain Frank McCluskey, the middle brother, was reported to be broke by his ex-wife Abigail. Henri found him drinking pricey IPA and his girlfriend, Kitty Gibson, driving a new-to-her red Camaro. He knew there was $27,000 in the safe, but said he couldn't have done it since he didn't know the combination.
Is $27,000 enough for a new Camaro?
A used Camaro.
Oh, a used Camaro. New to her Camaro.
New to her. Depends how old it was.
All right.
Father Platt McCluskey, the youngest brother, lives a life of poverty, shown by the old brown Plymouth he drives. It's less because of his vows, and more due to the poor poker playing. He said he didn't take anything out of the safe.
I believe the man of the Lord.
Abigail McCluskey, Frank's asks, was always hitting her credit limit, but the Monday after the wedding, she paid Henri and tipped nicely in cash.
Interesting. Who did that? I wasn't paying attention.
The ex-wife, Abigail.
Abigail.
3 suspects left town after the wedding. The groom, Tony Ladro, the caterer, Pam Burns, and the maid of honor, Annie DeCrono.
Okay.
Tony told Grace that he had to go to a business meeting and left Sunday morning since their honeymoon was canceled. Henri suspects wherever Tony went, it wasn't alone.
Uh-oh.
Flash Masterson milked Sean McCluskey for the wedding, using the money to pay off a bad debt to the same. Now he's going to Hollywood.
Oh, okay.
Annie DeCrono didn't say where she was going, but she needed a passport and a bikini wax to get there.
Slut.
Captain Frank is looking at Pam and Flash for the deed. So,
all right, fine.
Who
So
needs
it
to be
wasn't
clipped for this
Pam
crime?
or Flash.
Okay, so no Pammy, no Flashy.
No.
I'm coloring them yellow. Or, I'm sorry, red. No Pam, no Flash.
I don't really think it was Sean.
Okay.
I don't think it was Sean.
So Sean is also red?
Correct. Annie, I think, had stuff she was doing, but I don't think she needed the money to do it.
Okay, so it's like the classic mystery thing where she's guilty of something, just not this crime?
Yeah, it's a red herring.
Okay, so you want her red?
Yeah.
All right, and then there were 4.
And there were 4. All right, Tony, would he steal the money? basically to go do something, probably with Annie. But they came back not being in any luxurious fashion, not tanned.
Not tanned.
We could have gone somewhere cold, but there were palm trees on the thing. So, I don't really think it was Tony.
You want me to color him red
Yeah,
or yellow?
color him red.
Okay. So you're down to, so how about Abigail, the ex-wife?
I feel like it's rather malicious for her to steal from her ex-husband's, niece?
And it was still her niece, right?
Her former niece.
But the niece that invited her to the wedding and into the photos. It would be a really cold-hearted thing to do.
Exactly. Like, that's a real bitch. And she doesn't... I know she's kind of been painted to be a mean person, but I don't think she really is. I don't think she did it.
You think she was painted as a mean person?
No, I just don't remember.
Okay.
I was assuming she was.
I mean, I think there was, I'll call it the normal mean that people get with their exes.
Yeah.
But not like bitch to all humanity mean.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so now you are down to the brothers, Father Pat and Captain Frank.
So neither of them said that they know the combination, or no. They said they don't know the combination of the safe.
Frank said he didn't know the combination. Frank said he couldn't have done it. He knew there was $27,000 in the safe, but said he couldn't have done it since he didn't know the combination.
He knew there was, I don't know how he knew the exact amount of money. They all had the possibility to have done it. But did something specifically happen to point to one of them? None of them had the pictures. Did any of them go to see Flash? No.
No.
Because only basically Flash and Sean knew the combination, really, right? Maybe the kids did. Maybe Tony and, what was the wife's name? Grace? Grace knew. But, I mean, maybe that is pointing to Tony, because Tony knew. Kind of. Maybe we're assuming he knew. I guess we don't know for certain. And if he really did, I mean, if they were opening the safe in front of people, I mean, someone took a picture of it. So anyone else, I guess, could have seen the combination.
They still would have to get into the room, move a painting, open the safe.
Yeah. Now, I don't think a girlfriend driving a Camaro really means much. We haven't seen Father McCluskey. Yeah, I did say that right. But we haven't seen Father McCluskey show any money off, have we?
No, just the opposite. He drives a brown beater Plymouth, and the only thing that, we've seen from him was the reference to him playing in the mayor's poker game and never winning. So he drives
He's got a gambling issue. No. One that he doesn't seem to consider an issue, but he does lose a lot of money to it. I don't know. It seems to me that the father is probably the best guess, but he's the guy who I wanted to pick the least. He seems like such a nice guy. I don't think he would want to do that to people, even to fuel his addiction. I don't think I'm going to get this one right, guys. I have a feeling the actual killer was one of the people I already said no to.
Well, you have 6 hard no's and 2 I don't knows.
Yeah. Well, I'll consider it a win if it's one of those 2 I don't knows at this point.
Is that what you want to go with?
One
of the 2 I don't knows?
I think it was one of the 2 I don't knows, but I don't feel like I'm allowed to leave it there. I think I have to pick one. And you know what? You know who probably had the best chance to pick up on what the number was? It was probably the detective, the police captain.
Oh, Frank?
Frank. He probably had the best chance to figure out what it was.
I mean, if it was Sean's mother's birthday, it was also
Pat
and
Frank's. But they had to find out, if that was the combination that was being used.
True.
All right. Well, I guess I'm going with Frank.
Okay, we're coloring Frank
I guess we're
green.
coloring Frank green.
All right.
Sounds like fun, fellas.
So a reminder that we are ad-free. We're going to be ad-free pretty much forever. But we do ask you to check out our authors and their backlists. Supporting them supports our show. And today is a new author to us, Robert J. Binney. Check out his website. The link is in the show notes. Support his projects, and we'll keep reading you excellent stories like the one he wrote for us today. All right, now it is time for A Cut Above the Rest. Henri stood, thankful he chose the right shirt for the spotlight, even if it was just shining on 2 tables in the community pancake breakfast. He turned to Sean. I appreciate your concerns about Pam, but she had neither motive nor opportunity. Sean pursed his lips. Henri knew the locked door alibi was not enough. The way people are throwing money around town this week, just about everyone's a suspect. Henri turned to Grace's friend Annie. Sorry, I misspoke. I don't think you spent a lot of money this week. I think you let Tony pay for everything. He faced Tony. I called the resort. Paying cash was smart, but you should have changed your name on the reservation. Henri looked at Grace. I'm sorry, honey. I don't think your new husband took your money. I think he just took your friend on your honeymoon. Never turn down the opportunity to be catty. The stylist's golden rule. Grace tossed her iced tea in her husband's face and, lacking other drinks, dumped her syrup pitcher on Annie. The oozing lacked dramatic flair, Henri thought, but it was still devastating. Flash here certainly had his reasons for hating your family, Sean, and he actually had your safe's combination, even though he didn't know it. Henri paused for Flash's protest. But I scrolled through every photo he took. The timestamps don't leave any room for someone to sneak in and steal the money. There was a moment I considered you a suspect. As you know, I won't discuss your troubles in public. I'm honor-bound by the hairdresser's code of ethics. But you convinced me that wasn't enough cash to rescue your business. Father Pat, you're a notoriously bad poker player and a gambler. I saw your car up close at the bootlegger. Henri rubbed his forehead. The night you paid off your debt. The priest turned as white as his collar. Henri held up his fingers with a just you wait smile. Now, Abigail McCluskey has been whining about lack of alimony for years, and now she suddenly has cash. Motive, sure, but I couldn't figure out opportunity. And Kitty, with your new used sports car? But you weren't even at the wedding. He turned to Captain Frank. Nice gift. Did you know that Sean had no idea how much money was stolen? But you did. You knew the exact amount. The policeman jumped to his feet. What are you talking about? You asked and I looked you in the eye. Everyone knows how honest you are. But see, when I asked you if you took the money, do you remember what you said? You said you didn't know how to open the safe. And when I asked Father Pat about the safe, he told me he didn't take the money out. That wasn't the question. Father Pat stammered, but it was the truth. Henri put his hands on the priest's shoulders. You found just the right words. And when I asked you if the number 1206 meant anything, you touched your collar. It's your poker tell. You knew your brother's combination was your mother's birthday. You didn't take the money out. You just opened the safe. And Captain Frank, you didn't open the safe. You just took the money out. Henri turned to Sean. Frank has always resented you for inheriting the family business and fortune, while he got nothing. And Father Pat, well, I guess he got over his head and, how does he put it, forgot his calling. Sean climbed across the table in order to get to his middle brother. Grace bawled and slapped at her husband, and Annie cried even louder as the maple goo ran into her face. Father Pat sat crestfallen. Mrs. Butterwick, the piano teacher, took it all in. Hot damn! Henri sat down and took a soggy bite of pancake. His first successful detection case was closed. He could get used to this.
All right, I should have let me pick two suspects, apparently. What's with these darn two suspect stories?
I'm going to say at some point you are going to catch on that it's not just one.
I'm getting so pissed. You gotta tell me, man.
I can't tell you, man. I was
not?
like, so you only have two left. You're like, yep, I do.
There's only two, but I can't just pick two. That seems wrong.
And you're like, and one said this and the other said this. I'm like, yep.
I hate this.
But you got another half point.
No, damn it. I got both, okay? I got both freaking points. You know why I picked the one guy? It's just because it seemed more like he did one part of the crime than the other. Mm-hmm. I got both, darn it.
You had it right.
This is stupid. Stop picking two killers.
I just love this one. I loved all of the puns, all of the hair stuff. It just laughed from one end of this one to the other.
Well, I hated it, darn it. I'm kidding. It was a good one.
Well, allow me to introduce you to Robert J. Binney.
Sounds like a plan.
Seattle screenwriter Robert J. Binney has written about Joe Strummer, James Bond, joyriding with the Salt Lake City police, and his relationships with Peter Frampton and President Jimmy Carter, although not together, for the Los Angeles Times, AtwoodMagazine.com, and other fine publications. His recent fiction has appeared in Starlight Pulp and the Down and Out anthology, A Killing Rain. He's finally succumbed to technology and can be found on Facebook and Instagram at RJ Binney. Better yet, check out his website at thirdactmedia.com. The link is in the show notes. So, Jack, I did some research, high-quality research. I went to that mega site Wikipedia, who knows everything I don't, to find you a story about safecracking, which, I guess this one was safe-cracked. So in June of 1869, Manhattan's Ocean National Bank was robbed in a highly planned and coordinated, even orchestrated event by George Leonidas Leslie. Now, Leslie was originally a Cincinnati man. He was an architect by training and by trade, and knew his way around a set of drawings. He was a smart man, a detailed planner, and it turned into a highly successful bank robber. Ocean National Bank was his first robbery. It took over 3 months to plan, and his financier, Frederica Marm Mandelbaum, invested $3,000 in the planning, which yielded over $750,000 in return. The heist had a 3-day setup that included drilling from the basement into the vault, using a gadget called a Little Joker to capture the safe's combination, and returning on Sunday night when the safe was at its most full to make the extraction. According to Wikipedia, the police captain put on the case noticed that Leslie had made withdrawals from the bank, but since Leslie was known as an educated architect, he didn't make the connection. Reportedly, when he learned that Leslie had attended Mandelbaum's dinner parties, he said, quote, "This can't lead to anything good." Leslie led and planned bank robberies from 1869 through 1878. As things often do, they got sketchy between thieves and hot for Leslie. He was juggling his young wife, the gang with the Mandelbaum, putting together a new gang with her primary rival, John Grady, and lovers who included Babe Draper, the wife of one of his gang. On May 29, 1878, Leslie went to the Murphy Saloon, where he received an envelope from Babe saying that her husband found out about their affair. He left his bodyguard at the bar and went to meet her. His body was found on June 4th. He had been shot once in the head and once in the heart with the gun he had previously given to Babe for protection. Link to the article in Wikipedia is in the show notes. There's a couple other places on the web to find stories about George Leslie and some of his forays into safecracking. Sounds like he was a real pro at it. All right, Jack, that wraps up this episode of Mysteries to Die For. Support our show by subscribing, telling a mystery lover about us, and giving us a 5-star review. Check out our new website. It's M2D4 Podcast. So M, the number 2, D, the number 4, podcast.com. for links to this season's authors and to all of our episodes. The link is in the show notes. Mysteries to Die For is hosted by TG Wolff and Jack Wolff. Clipped was written by Robert J. Binney. Music and production are by Jack Wolff. Episode art is by TG Wolff. Join us next week for Toe Tag, which is the first chapter from a fresh release in the mystery, crime, or thriller genre. Then come back in 2 weeks for our next original story, where attempted infanticide is the featured murderless crime. It's Safe Haven by Jason Little. All right, Jack, take us out.